All right, so it's time for the July wrap up. I'll pick out my book of the month and then talk about what I'm going to read in August. Now, for all these books that I finished, I did video reviews and I'll post links to those down in the comments if you want more information. But I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about each one. So the first book I finished this month was Harlan Ellison's short story collection, The Beast That Shouted Love at the Heart of the World. And I've been reading quite a few Harlan Ellison short stories recently. This wasn't my favorite collection, but there was still some very memorable stories in this one. It seemed like he was definitely bringing a lot more shock and kind of some taboo topics into this collection compared to the first one I read. I still am a little bit on the fence with Harlan Ellison. I respect him as a writer, but it depends on what he decides to make his subject matter for me to see if I really love it or not. So really glad I read it, though. It was very entertaining. Then next up was Philip K. Dick, Dr. Blood Money. And this was a recommendation from a viewer of the channel, and I really enjoyed this one. It is a weird, wild ride in a post-apocalyptic setting, and Philip K. Dick he really brought some interesting characters into this one, and there's a lot of just very strange things that happen, especially as you get deeper and deeper into the novel. And it's definitely one that's going to stick with me and I'm going to remember for quite a while. And then next up was Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein. This is one of his most famous novels. It was one that I had yet to read, so I'm really glad I finished this one. I really did enjoy some of the philosophy about politics and war that were thrown into this one. And then I think what everyone really loves is some of the battle scenes with the power armor. But really enjoyed this one a bit more than I thought I would. And I'm going to continue to read more Heinlein. I have a reread coming up of Stranger in a Strange Land, but there's a bunch of other novels of his that I would like to get to in the near future as well. And then I read The Best of Frederick Pohl. This was a read with Matt from Science Fiction Reads and Richard over at Vintage SF. We've been going through all of these best ofs. I think we've surpassed the 50% mark, if I remember right now. We both had a lot of fun with this one. Frederick Pohl is a very good author. He was dabbling in a lot of topics that weren't really gone over for his time, it seems like. There's some politics, there's advertising, there's a lot of just kind of human stories in this one, what it's like to grow old. We had a lot of fun discussing this one. And that one was over on Richard Rempel's channel. It was the first video we did where it was live. So we had some live audience participation in that one that kind of added to the whole discussion, which was a lot of fun. So may have to do some more of those lives in the future for this best of series that we're going through. And then after that was The Universe Against Her by James H. Schmitz. This was a wife's wildcard pick. My wife's been going through and randomly picking out some books in my library. And so I was really glad to read a James H. Schmidt novel. I haven't read one of his before, and even to call this a novel might be a stretch. It's kind of like two short stories put together, and the whole thing was only 150 some pages, but I really liked the first story that was in this one. The second one didn't like it quite as much, and it sounded like that was the consensus from a lot of viewers and commenters when I did that video. And then after that was Bring the Jubilee by Ward Moore. And I really love this book. This book is a alternate history, which usually are not my favorite types of novels, but he did it so well. It was one of the very first early alternate history. It reads more like literary fiction. It takes place after about 50 to 70 years after the Civil War, maybe a little bit further, maybe 70 to 80 years after the Civil War. And it's a alternate history where what if the South had won the Civil War? This one probably doesn't get talked about as much with some of these other alternate history books that are out there, but this one was amazing. It was my favorite in that subgenre by far. And Wardmore only wrote a few science fiction novels, which is kind of a shame because I really fell in love with his writing in that novel. And then after that was Pattern Master by Octavia Butler. We got some amazing pulpy cover art on this one. This was my first Octavia Butler read, and it was her first published novel. I really enjoyed this. For this being her first novel, I think she knocked it out of the park. And it really made me intrigued to read more in this Patternist series that she did. So I'm going to be going through, I don't have any set timeline, but I'm going to go through and read every Octavia Butler novel in the order that she published them. She only wrote about 10 novels, so it's not a massive undertaking. But man, I really enjoyed reading that and can't wait to read more from her. And then the last book that I finished this month was Gods of Riverworld by Philip Jose Farmer. This completes the Riverworld saga, if you want to call it that, or the series. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm still kind of putting together all of my thoughts, going back over some of my notes from some of the previous books, and I'm going to do a video that goes over the whole series, and that'll be coming out here pretty soon in the month of August. So just look for that. I will say, I agree with a lot of people that after the first book, To Your Scattered Bodies Go, seems like the series kind of goes downhill. But there was a lot of interesting things that happened. I guess I'm glad I read it, but just wait and I'll come out with a video describing a little bit more. So now it's time to pick out my book of the month, and I'm going to cheat, which I often do, and I'm going to give it to two books, Dr. Blood Money and Bring the Jubilee. These are wildly different books. Bring the Jubilee is a kind of a more serious fictional book, you know, but there is some subtle humor in there with following our main character. And Dr. Blood Money was just an absurd wild ride with a bunch of crazy, zany characters. Both of them I probably won't be forgetting anytime soon. Okay, so now let's talk about what I plan to read in the month of August. So I want to read Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I've read this twice before, but this time I'm going to read the short story. A lot of people probably don't even know that this was originally a short story. And then I'm going to reread this and then kind of compare them and give my thoughts on the difference between that story as a short story compared to the full novel. Then I want to read The Shockwave Rider by John Brunner. This is kind of an early cyberpunk, and I kind of want to get my feet wet with John Brunner's writing before I jump into Stand on Zanzibar, which I'm going to be reading pretty soon. I'd like to read The Invisible Man. This is a very short, probably easy read from H.G. Wells. I've really enjoyed everything I've read from H.G. Wells. At some point, I'm going to read the next wife's wildcard pick, which is The Mind Traders by J. Hunter Hawley. And then I would like to read Stardance, which is the first novel in a trilogy from Spider and Gene Robinson. This is, quite a few of these are on this list that I'm reading through, the masterpieces of science fiction. But that might be kind of the next series I get into. We'll see how much I like the first book before I decide if I want to read the whole series. And then in our reading through the best of, Matt picked out the best of James Blish. So I haven't really read any James Blish short stories. I've read 3 of his novels so far and really enjoyed them. So I'm excited to read some of these short stories. And then another short story collection that I'm almost all the way through that I probably will be coming out with a video soon is Living Way Out by Wayman Gwynn. So look for some of those videos coming out, but tell me what you read in July. Tell me what some of your favorite reads were of the month, and tell me what you're thinking about reading in August. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.